Okay, we're live.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining us today to talk about advancing energy efficiency in buildings in Southeast Asia. This is part of a series of events, but this is a really important one to us where we're launching an online course on energy efficiency in buildings. We have a great setup today of speakers, and I'll introduce people one by one, but we have panelists from, we have Andrea who's the Director of Cities and Buildings at the Green Restorative Actions and Sustainable Solutions organization. We have Retno who's the head of the Center for Research on Energy Policy at the Bandung Institute of Technology. We have Farida from the World Bank Group on International Finance, so the IFC from World Bank Group, and we have Lem from the Singapore Green Buildings Council. And we're also joined by our friend and colleague Ian Hamilton, who's the Associate Professor from UCL, who's going to be helping us with the course and run the session. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to start with making a few opening remarks, just as a way of starting. So just a few logistics to start with. If you could try and make sure that we've got as limited background noise as possible, that would be great. Please mute microphones wherever possible and only unmute when you ask to speak. If you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will try to get to questions. If we can't, we'll certainly use people's thoughts in the work we do going forward. If panelists would like to answer any of the questions directly because they think it's easy to do so, please just feel free to go ahead and do that. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just start by setting the scene, and then we'll ask each of the presenters to switch their camera on when they come to their section. So I just wanted to, as usual with IEA, take a big picture view of why we're here, and just use that as a way of framing our conversation today. So next slide, please, Matthew. So we all know how important energy efficiency is, but I just wanted to remind us all as to how large a job it needs to play in reducing emissions if we're going to meet our global climate goals. So the IEA has these two scenarios, or two of the IEA scenarios, of the stated policy scenario, which is what governments have announced that they're going to do. And we also have a sustainable development scenario, which is what we think governments need to do to achieve a less than 2-degree outcome. But the sustainable development scenario is very special in that it also has two other elements in it. One is universal access to modern energy services, and the other is appropriate air quality for all. So it has these three elements. It's not just a climate scenario. But energy efficiency needs to do more than 40% of the work in order for us to get from one to the other. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Matthew. The problem is whilst we have that 40% of the work that needs to be done by energy efficiency, we're actually seeing a slowdown in energy efficiency improvement. People who remember when the Sustainable Development Goals were established will remember that we were looking for a doubling of the rate of improvement of energy efficiency in those days. So it was a 2.5% improvement that we were looking for. We got there slowly, I have to say. So we were, by 2015, we were doing reasonably well. But because it had taken a while to build up to that level, we already needed a higher rate of improvement. So we already needed 3% really, rather than the original 2 or 2.5. And now we've slowed down even further, and the pandemic has been a real shock to the system. So we're looking at actually needing a 4% improvement, something like that, in order to reach those goals that I just showed in the previous chart. So we have a huge amount of work to do. Buildings, of course, will play a massive role in that process. Next slide, please. But there are benefits, there are opportunities as well. So in this period where governments are investing in rebooting economies, as a result of what's happened through the very, very sad and destructive health crisis the world has seen. We're saying that we're looking at how you can invest in the energy system to create jobs. And energy efficiency is actually the best place to make those investments. So this is something that we're talking to governments about and of course trying to encourage. But buildings in particular yield something like 15 jobs per $1 million of investment. And the really important thing about these jobs is they're not, unlike some stimulus packages that we've seen in the past, they're not short-term boom and bust type cycles. These are long-term jobs, they're local jobs, they're high quality. So they really are an investment for the future. So great opportunity for governments to seize this moment in time and make something good come out of something terrible. Next slide, please. We're seeing some of this starting to happen. It's a bit uneven. Governments have announced, billions of dollars in stimulus. The main area who decided to really push energy efficiency in this context is the European Union, who are accounting for something like 85% of the total declared investment in energy efficiency. These figures need updating, but it gives us a theme. It shows us that buildings energy efficiency in particular has tweaked people's imaginations and vehicles. So that's, of course, also important to our urban development. Next slide, please. Another important thing to note is this, and of course, we're all talking about trying to reach an early peak by 2030, if at all possible, before seeing that reduction in emissions that we need. The only way of doing that is to really use energy efficiency to its full potential. Otherwise, all other options will be just too costly, and we'll miss the opportunities that we have. But the good thing is, if you look at the right-hand side of this chart, we have technologies to make the changes that we need. We know what they are today. So 3/4 of what we see we need for decarbonisation technology-wise could be used by what's already there. So we're not, people who think that we need massive innovation here, or that there's a silver bullet waiting to be discovered. That's not the case. We can get on with this now. We also have on the left-hand side, we can see that technology performance, so the yellow bar in particular is the important one here for our conversation today. That's where the majority of the improvements are going to come from. So we have this package, we know what to do, we need to get on with it, and that's one of the reasons we're here today to discuss how to use our known technologies, known practices to achieve this change that we need. Next slide, please. Just as a last slide to see how that breaks down in the context of Southeast Asia, our subject for today. So the left-hand blue bar was observed energy consumption in 2018. Our 2040 stated policies is the next blue bar. And then how do we get to SDS, which is our sustainable development scenario on the far right-hand side? We get to it through improving equipment energy efficiency, buildings energy efficiency, and decarbonising the power sector. So they're our main chunks. And the course that we're talking about today is primarily looking at the first two of those, so equipment and buildings energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So that's the finish of my opening remarks. We're now going to pass to Ian Hamilton to give us an overview of the buildings course that we're launching today. Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. There we go. Thanks so much. Once I was taking control of the slides, I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you, Mel. And for all of you who are joining today, I'm very excited to be able to launched the online course for energy efficiency in buildings. This is something which, as someone who works in education and the like, this is a really important tool in progressing and furthering what Mel has just been describing around energy efficiency for buildings. So as Mel said, what is decarbonization so critical? Well, on both sides, we have both an enormous demand for energy coming from the building sector, almost around 24%. And when we look at the embodied emissions as well as the direct emissions from buildings in terms of CO2, it takes up a substantial chunk, and buildings as one single sector is the majority. And so it's an important area for us to work towards decarbonizing, but of course, ensuring that what's being built can stand the test of time in terms of energy performance. Where, as Mel said, is this going to be happening? If we look at CO2 emissions, and in particular, the appliances and the way in which the buildings are being built, in terms of their fuel usages, a lot will be riding on emissions reductions that are coming from, of course, the electricity system, but importantly as well is the performance of the building itself in terms of the fabric, how much heat or cooling is being needed, and the appliances that are within. So these sorts of improvements are really vital to, especially so for the ASEAN region and Southeast Asia, to consider around how we build better buildings going forward. So what the online course for energy efficiency in buildings is focused on is building the fundamentals and expanding that in terms of what it is that policymakers, and for those of you who work with policymakers or are policymakers, understand around energy efficiency and what could be tracked a part of that. More explicitly around energy efficiency policies for smart cities as well. So this is a suite of courses that are now ready to go and is available for registration to begin. And so this is what we're really excited for today. And why did this course get developed? Fundamentally, we have both new buildings being designed and old buildings being refurbished, and the focus on quality of life, reducing the environmental impact, and of course, being a part of that transition towards that decarbonized building sector. And importantly, of course, it's a important stimulative activity, creates a lot of jobs. We spend a great deal of our time indoors in our buildings, especially now, and the way in which we use our buildings has changed and will continue to change. It is one of the important areas around growth in an economy. And so the number of buildings is going to grow from what we see today, and that's particularly true in Southeast Asia. And there are many appliances that continue to grow alongside that, and in particular, looking at air conditioning ownership, which has increased 7.5 times by 2050 in Southeast Asia, which could increase 7.5 times by 2050. Buildings are also an important part of the overall picture for ASEAN in terms of how much electricity is being consumed and will continue to as a part of that demand. So really, buildings in the region are incredibly important. And what this implies is that to continue to protect for the future around how much energy is being used and the cost to consumers, the cost to building occupants, to build and to refurbish so that they are most efficient is really vital. So what does the course do? Well, it gives you an understanding of what energy efficiency in buildings mean. It tells you around the technology and design options that are available to improve energy efficiency of buildings. It describes the policies and the various forms in which they can be applied, and also outlines the investment and financing for energy efficiency in buildings. Policies and finance are really vital to the key around improving what we're doing with buildings, but so too are codes and the role of codes and building standards around how to structure and promote energy efficiency in buildings. So we also describe the ways in which you can measure, evaluate, and verify energy efficiency. And this is really important, as Mel said, to be able to determine, are you on track? What is working? What is not working? And then who's responsible? Who are the different actors who can be involved, and how do they participate in order to ensure that building improvements are happening? And then there's a variety of other additional resources in terms of workplace for energy efficiency issues in buildings. And so this is meant to be a place that you can go and learn, but also to come back to and make available the resources that the IEA have for this journey. So who is it for? It is designed for those who are making policy decisions, whether that's at the national level, the state level, or the city level. It's for architects and engineers who want to better understand some of the details around energy efficiency and some design ideas. It's focused on those who might be in financial institutions, again. And finally, also research and NGOs and anyone else who's really interested in energy efficiency more broadly. I think this course can offer a lot. So it has 4 modules, and each module has a set of activities within that to better understand its elements. So there's an introduction overall, how energy is being used in buildings, its potential, the way in which more efficient buildings are designed, the technologies that are used in those buildings, and also a special session around cooling and comfort in hot climates. There's a session around, or a module around implementing energy efficiency. And this is focused on the policies and target setting and stakeholder engagement, explicitly around building codes and standards, and energy efficient building operations. There's a module on measuring energy efficiency, and specifically around data and indicators, how you evaluate programs and implementation of codes and standards and policies. And then also importantly, what else energy efficiency can give to you. And this is really where we see the multiple benefits of energy efficiency really vital, whether that was jobs or health or comfort or energy security. Energy efficiency plays a really important role in those. And finally, enabling investment in energy efficiency, whether that's investment through policy or through project standardization or procurement. There's a variety of means by which investment to improve energy efficiency occurs, and the module goes through those. So the format of the course, it is based on the MOOC model, or the Massive Open Online Course model, and it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's approximately 30 to 40 hours of course time across 6 to 8 weeks to complete. And there's a variety of material that are available: videos, reading, slides, examples from Southeast Asia as well as other countries. There's downloadable content, and there's 1 evaluation per module. There's also, of course, a final evaluation, and this is meant to really kind of ensure that you have a good understanding of the content. But also importantly, there is a link through to the group, the IEA Energy Efficiency Policy in Emerging Economies LinkedIn group. And we see this as one of the ways in which you can both interact with instructors, some of the course instructors, but also within the wider group and community who are working together around this. And in terms of the certification, to gain a certification for this, if you complete over 75% of the module, then you'll have an overall certificate. But we of course encourage you to complete the whole thing. What to expect? Well, this is an example where there are videos. There'll be instruction material, videos from our experts at the IEA speaking about different angles of energy efficiency, whether that's policies or technologies. There'll be detailed understanding around certain concepts, or giving an illustration of some of the analysis that's been undertaken with the IEA and partners. And then a series of, as I said, evaluations and kind of tests to make sure that the information is really founded. And why should you take this course? Well, it is designed for a broad audience. And this is the idea that we have a common language, a common building block across the region to describe. It's comprehensive, and it's been designed with regionalization in mind, along with global best practices. It's downloadable content, and of course, importantly, it is free. And very briefly, there's a variety of resources that are available, and the online module builds on all of that. And even the research that Mel was showing today and what continues to come from the IEA is a place to be able to draw from. And it's also meant to facilitate an ongoing dialogue. And that's one other thing I'll just briefly mention before passing over to our panel, is that we're in the process of building the ASEAN Roadmap for Sustainable Buildings and Construction 2020 to 2050. And in this, we are seeking to engage with the community of interested professionals and stakeholders like yourselves to contribute to the development of that roadmap. And so this builds on our previous roadmap exercises, looking at regional roadmaps, which were high level but extensive work that went into policies and technologies and the current status and recommended actions to be undertaken. But in the work that we're doing with the ASEAN roadmap is really to build on that regional activity and engage with yourselves to understand and then describe the strategies by how those roadmaps could be implemented to achieve a more sustainable construction and building sector. And so one of the things that we'll do over the next next month or so is to continue to build in that. And we really invite you to participate in that through a survey process and an engagement process. I won't take too long, as these slides will be available for others to see, but it has a variety of themes that we focus on in addition to buildings themselves, the urban environment, clean energy, and resilience of buildings. And we go through a process of building up from the bottom, again, focused on strategies. And what we're aiming at doing is, again, with regionalization in mind and strategies in mind, is to build out a picture as to how we implement. And so we continue to have strategy elements, milestones at what could be achieved by what time, and then also targeted actions that could be undertaken by different groups. And so finally, here is a way in which to contribute to that, and both within the in the online course, as well as through this website, this project website, we're inviting you to participate, whether that's through the survey, which can be shown on the bottom right of the screen, to gain your understanding and your expertise, but then also for you during the online course to contribute examples through what you understand to be good and best practice in the region. And so I'll leave it at that, and I'm excited for you to participate in this. I'm also excited for the panel coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thanks for the introduction. So as you can see, our purpose today is to launch the course, but also we have a very practical purpose for it as well in helping use it to build this roadmap for Southeast Asia, and to gain insights from as many practitioners, from as many different stakeholder groups as possible in the region. So hopefully we can inspire people to do that. If you know of people who aren't here today, once you've seen today's presentations and you can think of others who you think might be able to contribute or might benefit from this, please do share this as widely as you possibly can. So now we're going to move on to our panel. We're going to have 10-minute presentations, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion. And we're going to start this with Andrea, for the Director of Cities and Buildings at Green Restorative Actions and Sustainable Solutions. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Hello, hello everyone. I hope you can clearly hear me. I'm Andrea. Yes. And so for this part of the presentation, I'll be giving a brief overview on what's been happening with regards to energy efficiency in the Philippines. So I'm part of an organization called GRASS. So it's Green Restorative Actions and Sustainable Solutions. So let's see if I can control the screen. Okay, so there you go. So I will be giving my brief perspective as a practicing architect and urban designer in the Philippines. I'm currently working for two organizations, one of which is GRASS, which works with local government units or cities in making their, in doing small projects so that to make their cities more sustainable. And then I'm also part of an organization called Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines. So this one is more of giving out lectures. We've been doing that for the past 17 years. And last year was our first time to do it online. And last year, we were able to work on a project with the Climate Change Commission of the Philippines, wherein we were in discussion of what makes a climate smart building here in the Philippines. So, okay. A little bit of overview what's happening here in my country. So this one, this was on May 17th. And the heat index factor was around 40 degrees Celsius. So I was hearing Melanie and Ian talking about there being, I think, around 30 degrees, but here in the Philippines, we are now right in the middle of our summer, and it's really bordering on dangerous with regards to the temperature outside. So this one is around 2 p.m. The heat index is around 40 degrees Celsius. And then if you see, this one is I don't know if you can see it clearly. This is a map of Metro Manila. So that is the capital of the Philippines. It's around 50,000 hectares with a population of around 13 million. But look at how little green spaces, parks and green spaces we have. So if you add that to the fact that we are a tropical country and we're experiencing our heat index usually ranges around 30 degrees to 40 degrees because it's summer and we have so little green spaces. And that just adds to the increase in the need for cooling energy here in the Philippines. And then you factor in the fact that we are still in lockdown because of the COVID-19 situation. And so a lot of people are mandated to stay indoors. So I saw in Ian's slide that it says 90%, we spend 90% of our time in the inside buildings, but because of the lockdown, maybe it's around 98% now. So you add the fact that it's very, very hot and the increasing temperature because of climate change, the lack of green spaces where people can go out for a break of being indoors, and you see the potential, the very huge potential for energy efficiency, especially when it comes to cooling here in the Philippines. And so I'll just give a very a snapshot of how buildings are regulated here in the Philippines. So when it comes to building permits, it's the National Building Code of the Philippines, which was established in 1972, and the revised implementing rules and regulations was made in 2004. And after that, there really hasn't been anything new added in our building code. So on the right, you can see the typical building code, building permit application. And it is usually done by the local government unit. So that's the term we say for cities. So for example, if you are going to construct a building in Quezon City, then you go to the city hall and you apply for the permit. So there's no national agency that really oversees how the building code is being implemented. And as you can see, the last revision was in 2004. But there's still a bit of good news when it comes to energy efficiency. In 2015, finally, there was the Philippine Green Building Code was created. I think this one just is the same as the National Building Code. The proponent is the Department of Public Works and Highways, but this one was created with the help of professional organizations in the built environment, and also a funding from IFC. So this was in 2015. But the sad thing about it is that it was only issued as a referral code, meaning it is not mandated, unlike the National Building Code, wherein you have to follow the standards and codes inside it. This one is just like a referral. Now, there were some pilot cities that were able, there are some pilot cities that was able to implement the Philippine Green Building Code, but the sad situation about this is that it's not being used nationwide. Not only several cities are using it. It's not mandatory, and it's now, this was done in 2015, and 6 years onwards. I'm speaking from a professional standpoint. I haven't heard of any feedback on how it is now, because usually codes are reviewed every 5 years. So I'm also curious on my part, what has happened since then? So this is on the part of the government side. Now, if we look at the private side, I think the private sector is doing much better when it comes to efforts in energy efficiency. So voluntary green building rating systems have become popular here in the Philippines. So this one, I'm just showing maybe 2 local and 2 international rating systems that are really popular at the moment. So on the left side, you have the local one. So there's Verde and there's Green, triple E. So these are from local initiatives, and they are voluntary. And then there's also international green rating systems that have become popular. So one is the LEED and Edge. So now let's, this is just a little bit of a timeline on what has happened. For example, from 2013 to 2019, in 2011, the biggest buzz in the built environment here in the Philippines is the office building of ADB, because I think it's one of the first, not exactly the first buildings, but it was one of the prestige projects that was pursuing LEED. And then in 2013, you have the Zwillig building, the first LEED platinum buildings. Back then, so maybe around 2013, there were still fewer professionals that are conversant with green building rating system. But flashback to but now, if you fast forward to 2019, it has really grown. It has really grown exponentially. The knowledge on green buildings, the professionals that are working on it, and even the appreciation of the private sectors, like developers. They've seen the benefits one can get from having green buildings and having your buildings rated. And then this one, during the pandemic, I've been teaching architecture, so I went back to teaching, and this is something that I show my students with regards to what is happening now and what should we be looking at. So perhaps by 2022, it will be the end of social distancing. But what are the other milestones that we should keep in mind? So for example, the UN SDGs by 2030, and then by 2050, where everyone is talking about shifting to net zero or zero carbon economy, and then moving forward to 2100, wherein that is where the climate should be stabilized at 1.5 degrees. This is the Paris Agreement. So I think it's all about looking at it at a bigger perspective as a professional of the built environment. Why are we doing this energy efficiency measures? And I usually leave my, this one is a demonstration cottage in Palawan. So I've given you an overview of some of the challenges that my country is facing with regards to implementing energy efficiency in buildings. And then the next buzzword when it comes to buildings is now net zero. So what is net zero? And the curious thing about it is that there's already a project. There is already a demonstration project of a net zero cottage. This was done by the Zero Carbon Resorts, and it's focused on resorts and tourism, and they even have their own rating system. So this is in Palawan. And then my last slide is just, I usually show this to my students in architecture, and it's really about thinking about sustainability and why are we doing so much efforts with regards to energy efficiency, climate change, and sustainability. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for your insights and that introduction to what's happening in the Philippines. It'd be interesting to talk a bit later on perhaps about the voluntary processes versus mandatory processes. It sounds like in the Philippines, the kind of private sector led interest in greener buildings, more sustainable buildings, might have started to create an environment where there are more practitioners, and maybe it's time to to revisit the idea of mandatory. Maybe it would be possible now when it wasn't possible 5 years ago. I mean, often in energy efficiency, there's a time and place and because something hasn't worked once doesn't mean to say that it couldn't work another time. So perhaps we can talk about that a bit later once we've seen the presentations from others. So now we're going to move on to Retno. Dr. Retno is from Bandung Institute of Technology, of course, a leading organization in one of the really critical countries in the region. Retno, if you'd like to give us your presentation, the floor is yours. Retno, you're muted still, sorry.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from Indonesia, but now maybe in Europe is still in the morning here. Yeah, I would like to share my experience in advancing buildings energy efficiency. I mean in Indonesia particularly, that is related to how the activity in energy efficiency as a mitigation measures for our NDC. It's a nationally determined contribution that is already submitted as a part of the Paris Agreement in 2030. And I would like to share how to quantify the emission reduction from the activity of the one measures. And also we can also use this model for how to quantify in the city level, maybe in the region level, as well as in national level or in Southeast Asia. But this is the idea how to assess this. Okay. Yeah, I would like to group our discussion in the 5 groups. Yeah, first is talking about the greenhouse gas emission in energy sector, and part 2 is energy efficiency as mitigation measures in the also the mitigation, not only mitigation measure, but also the new source of energy, because of we can make it efficient and then we can use for other purposes. Energy efficiency is the pillar of decarbonization, because of under NDC and Paris Agreement, we have to do something that we can decarbonize how much that greenhouse gas emission is released in the one activity, for example, and improving energy performance potential and addressing growing demand in building sector, and requirement for implementing the EE, particularly in the building sector. If we see this is only the case, but we can represent the case for maybe Southeast Asia in terms of energy sector, or in the national level, or in the global level. Because of I would like to share with you, because of I'm myself is also included in the global narrative for decarbonization in between Indonesia and other countries. And this is historical. We see that is the emission, greenhouse gas emission, is released particularly from electricity generation, direct combustion for fossil fuel, industry, transport, commercial, and extra. But if we see that there is the white one, for example, this one, this is greenhouse gas emission comes from electricity that is allocated by end use sector, because of in commercial and also residential buildings we use electricity, but we also release the indirect emission from energy or electricity that we use from electricity generation. Even the GHG emission is not directly released from when the electricity is used, but comes from the electricity generation. We see between 2018 in end use subsector. In 2010, because of we can see that this industry is seems like the biggest release of the GHG emission, but after that in 2018, and then power sector has become take a role, because of if we are talking about the decarbonization and also deep decarbonization, and then massive move to change our energy to become electricity is it's a must, because of we can control the emission as well as air pollution in one area. It's not in consumer. And this was that's why power sector become larger in everywhere in every countries if we still rely on the fossil fuel. And how to reduce it? One is change the energy sources, but another one is efficiency energy. We see that there's energy efficiency measures in the demand side. First is we have a target in energy efficiency in 2025, because of in industry is 6%, transport, household, and commercial building. And then we see that this household and commercial building is almost 6%. The percentage is not in the sector, but for the total sector. Efficiency standard and labeling implementation, this is more efficient, and now I think it's in many countries implemented that one. And also efficiency standard, even is not using standard and labeling because of a trajectory technology, and then efficient appliances can be used by all the sector. Indonesia NDC 2030 is also have a target how much the energy efficiency can reduce the emission in one country, and also other country NDC also can contribute how to reduce the emission through particularly for energy efficiency. Energy efficiency measures in the supply side, yes, of course, even if we do work hard in the efficiency and the demand side, but if the supply side still have a high carbon footprint, and then it seems like it's nothing because of we reduce more, but still the emission that release from the indirect is still high because of the supply side is still using more fossil, particularly coal, and then the carbon footprint is also high. And then innovation and research in the development, yes, of course, we have to start for technology, householder energy efficiency, like a lighting, air conditioning, and some other appliances, and system design for the equipment and process for less energy consumption. For example, design on the building is important part for the energy efficiency, because of once we design in efficient way, like a green building, and then there is also standard for the green building standard from Green Building Council in Indonesia. This is effective for implementing for the energy efficiency, because of once the building is already certified, it means not only for the appliances but also for the building design that is can reduce significantly for the energy. And low energy system design, like a building, also building codes and also electric appliances also take a role, because of now in the national level we have a building code now, but in the local subnational, for example, in the province and city level, they start with the release for the building code. And city or town system that in from Manila has just discussed about this one, in city or town system design is also contribute to efficient energy consumption. And there is some pillars in decarbonization to achieve additional determined contribution from Indonesia particularly, but also I think in other countries. First is pillar 1 is energy efficiency. It's because energy efficiency, it's not put it at pillar 2 or 3, but it is the first one, because of this is important. When we can reduce the energy consumption, and then in the supply side will also reduce the production, and then if we increase production, is can be used as another purpose here. And significantly reduce if we can implement first is for example, like in the building code, electric appliances, more efficient electric appliances, and also labeling is more effective as well. And not only for the building, but because of our industry also have a green industry, then the standard of the green industry is the industry must be efficient and use more clean energy. And then this is our national contribution, NDC. There are 4 pillars, then and the target of energy sector is almost 314 million ton CO2 reduction. And then from this amount, from the commercial and residential, we can reduce indirect emission because of most of this sector using electricity. And then the target is almost half for energy efficiency, because of energy efficiency also can be achieved from industry and as well as transportation. And the dynamic of building, we know that is driven by the population growth, economic development, per capita income, and commercial sector development. For residential, increasing per capita, increase energy demand as well, and also commercial building, increase size of service economy, modernization of building equipment will result in increase of energy consumption. Decarbonization in building would result from fuel switching, and also from the biggest is from energy efficient electric appliances. And also switching from one-side fuel combustion of electricity would reduce direct emission from buildings, and also decarbonize electricity generation sector, and also give impact to more GHG emission reduction. And the evolution of energy demand and commercial and associated greenhouse gas emission, we have model until 2050, and I will share how to develop this kind of the results here. For example, we can compare between if we do nothing as a business as usual, and then if we do decarbonize, and then we can in 2050 we can reduce our consumption under MTOA in these figures, but in emission also we can reduce significantly from electricity as well from the direct combustion of the fuel. And then this is the total reduction that we can achieve in 2050. But I have experience on one case only, if efficient standard and labeling as a policymakers, and then what happened for the result of the model itself, similar like this one, this in the national level, but focus on the commercial building, and this one is focused on the residential as well as commercial. This is the parameter that we use, GDP, population, household, and also some other parameters like a area of the building and area also the household, number of the household, and then how they can increase the area because of the development in this subsector. And then this one, the right one, this is the kind of technology that we use, cooking, lighting, etc. And then if we do nothing until 2050, and then this is the share of each of these appliances for energy appliances. Then this is the consumption of this one, cooking, lighting, still dominated. And then how to reduce this emission, and then we can run the model with the end use model, and then we can have the result if this is the business as usual. And then if we implement for the first is unconditional target under the NDC and extend it to 2050. And this is the countermeasure A, and then that one, another one is countermeasure B. And then we have also information about the type of energy, the share of appliances in office building, hotel, and hospital that we can use for the reference here. And then this is the model itself. The methodology where we have used AM and use is rather complicated model because of we can use in the level of type of technology, even in also in electric appliances. First, we have to estimate service demand. Based on the service demand, we can have how much actually electricity have to supply. And this one is the electricity service demand is influenced by population growth, economic growth, lifestyle. For example, what happened in 2050, maybe our community is maybe more efficient or still traditional, or modern, then expansive, and then need more energy, is not efficient. For example, this is just as an example. Then we can set in 2050 what kind of community will be happen, and then we can estimate how much actually the service demand, particularly for the electricity. And then the technology selection and others can be run with optimization based on how much the electric service demand, and then appliances or technology. And we have database in one sector. We almost have 100 database for technology, and also we use energy price as a optimization parameter, energy type, energy constraint, and emission factor, and also fuel availability. Based on the energy database and also technology database, even in the small part of these appliances, we can put it as a technology database, and then we can put in the difference efficiency, so we can run this model and optimize the model, not only based on the technology side, but also for the economic one. And we put it as energy price, and also investment, and also capex and opex, operational expenditure, and also capital expenditures. And then we can select the technology, and then also we can produce abatement cost curve. Each of this technology can have how much actually the MSC, marginal abatement cost, that can select from this, or we can calculate from this. This is a series curve here. And then this is just figures for the structure of electricity sector and also the equipment, and then we can run the model in the AM and use here. We call AM and use because of this is a model integrated, Asia Pacific integrated model, and we develop together because of the main program is developed by NIES, is and Japanese National Institute for Environment Studies, and then this is the person who first introduced with the model, and then we start with our model in each of countries, because of we have to change the structure of the model based on what happened in the countries, and then we collect together, and then we integrate between Asian and Pacific countries. But now the rest is only Asian countries, because of Asian countries now we use this global model, and the global model between Asia and also Europe. And as I mentioned before, we can select, this is only for the building in commercial and household sector, and then this is a type of the share of each of the technology. And this is findings, opportunity, scenario, and then how much actually that we can reduce our emission based on the appliances here. There is some our experience that I would like to share, but because of much that I have to put to give information, but I think from the presentation I can give it, you can just read it here. Because of first, energy efficiency measures in demand side could be implemented when the following condition is prevail. Yeah, for example, ESCO is one is a good idea because of supporting by ESCO, and then the building can have implementing energy efficiency because of the cost for investment and also operational can cover by ESCO. Then the reducing for the energy consumption can trade off for the payment for the investment cost and expenditure. Energy efficiency measures in the supply side could be implemented when the following condition is prevail. For example, why I have to discuss about the supply, because of there is nothing if we only focus on the demand when the supply side is not also have reducing for the greenhouse gas emission. And then the required policy for the above issues, there are financial support. And then incentive, yeah, we don't want to use the term is subsidy anymore, because of why we apply for the incentive, because of this is a good work, and why government not give an incentive for people have already efficient, or people can have clean energy, then we apply for the incentive. Award and penalty policies, because of that it's not only award, if there is also penalty, and then it is more effective, because of for example in Indonesia we have this one government regulation in green building and standard. If the building is not fulfill or meeting for the requirement for the green building, and then the building cannot operate it. And also ministerial regulation standard for, and also labeling, if the building have consumption in amount of 6,000 TOA, and then the building have energy management, yeah, or energy manager that they manage the consumption of energy in the building. And also comparing the required existing policy to close the gap, yeah, the policy to implement energy efficiency measures. And then we recommend in the demand side, particularly in the building, introduce regulation or fiscal or award approach that promote the production more efficient equipment and penalize the production of less efficient product. And through the labeling, the punishment is not from the government, but the punishment is from the consumer. To ensure the use of efficient energy appliances, introduce incentive packets for energy consumers, such as help for financing of expensive but efficient appliances. Introduce building code. This is important because of building code the building can follow the code, and then can meeting for the green building. And also introduce energy efficiency as major criteria in the rating. Maybe from this industry here is a building, yeah. And also proper award, green building, eco-label, and extra. And strengthening the capacity of the government official in energy efficiency arena, such as evaluating and inspecting the efficiency of energy system is important, because of when the government introduce this, like for example government regulation, and then if the staff don't have capability, and then they do not know how to give for example, evaluate and inspection for the building, and introduce energy pricing policy to promote energy efficiency undertaking, is gradual removal electricity and also oil subsidy, because of still until now we subsidy some of these product. Yeah, I think this is that I have to share, and thank you very much for the time. Yeah, I hope it's not more time for this. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Retno. Really comprehensive presentation, but also some key insights into what needs to happen and what has been happening. And also I like the way you've done that really comprehensive analysis that will help prioritize action. So that's precisely the type of information we hope to build into the roadmap as much as possible. So we'll be talking to you about how we can do that going forward. But for the moment, we're going to move on to our next presentation from Farida, who is from the IFC. And of course, as many people will know, IFC have done some really fantastic work in the region on green buildings. So Farida, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Right, if I can start my video, maybe from your end. But first of all, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. And on behalf of IFC, we really would like to congratulate the international agencies, energy agencies, IEA, on launching this online course on energy efficiency in buildings. Again, my name is Farida Lasida Adji. I am the East Asia Regional Lead for IFC's Green Building Market Transformations programs. For the organizer, for some reason, I can't start my video. Maybe if you can help doing that from your end, that will be great. Thanks very much. Right. So before we start, I'll introduce IFC. So IFC is a member of the World Bank Group, and IFC is focused on solutions for private sector development, and part of its missions is to create market that supports climate business. Next slide, please. Next, IFC created the green building programs through a comprehensive approach to sustainable building. As you can see here on the slide, it's a four-part strategy that includes the working with the banks and then working with the developers. IFC invests directly in the banks or in developers. And also IFC works on green building codes and incentive with the governments, advising governments. And also IFC introduce and maintains and work with partnerships on the Adji certifications programs. So in this afternoon, I would just like to touch on our experience on the why is it, and then the cost and the benefits, and some examples around that, and also the importance of partnerships, collaborations, and then the enabling environment that is required to have this, to transform the market, and also the path moving forwards, going through zero carbon and resilient buildings, and also the financings kind of environments required for that. Next, please. So we know that climate change cannot be solved without tackling buildings. The urbanization pressures means that large portions of the populations are moving into cities, as we see today, and then buildings generate 19% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, and also it consumes 40% of the electricity globally. But at the same time, 80% of viable potential is actually untapped, even though technical solutions already exist today. Next, please. So next, the building sectors is can see that a major culprit is accounting for 28% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, and it consumes more than half of all the energy, right? And then it's also expected to grow further. By 2060, the total floor space will be most likely double compared to what it is today. So how to balance the demand for a significantly larger built environment while minimizing the resource depletions and carbon impact is really critical to our future. So here, IFC really commend IEA on coming up with a MOOC on energy efficiency in buildings, which is a very important. Right. So next, please, right? Yes. So, well, buildings can pose threats to the planet, but if it's built sustainably, actually it brings values to all stakeholders, from builders, buyers, and banks, right? And also for policymakers, providing incentive, coming up with regulations for, for energy efficient buildings, sustainable buildings, or green buildings can really bring results to their nationally determined contribution, for example, and also more importantly, also for more efficient infrastructures, which can translate into the country's more competitive businesses and economy. Next, please. Now, let's take a step back and define exactly what we mean by green building, right? So we see that it's not enough to just self-declare that the building has met a standard. It has to be certified by a reputable certification systems, right? And to this end, the building must also needs at least 20% more resource efficient, including energy, than compared to a comparable baseline building in that local market particular area, right? And then resource efficiency, of course, here includes energy efficiency, which is the topic of our discussion this afternoon, right? And then finally, in order to satisfy its green building finance requirement, which becomes more important, projects must have quantified impact reporting, which includes energy, water save, or reduce GHG emissions as well. Next, please. So to this end, to promote resource efficient buildings, IFC for the past more than 10 years have developed the green building market transformation programs. And within that, we also have developed Adji software, which you can see here, which is the first of its kind, and it's free of charge for anyone to sign up and use it. It's available through edgebuildings.com. And the complexity of the applications, because you can see that it's very, it's simple and it's intuitive to use it, but the complexity of the application is really hidden beneath the user interface. So it helps architect and engineer, investors also, to make it easy for people to cut back on the resource intensity of their buildings design. Next, please. And Adji is possible across all sectors. It can be new buildings, existing buildings, it can be homes, hospitality, hotels, offices, hospitals, campuses, schools, industrial warehouses, and even we have a couple of airports already. One is actually in, that is Adji certified. One is actually in Clark, the Philippines, right? Next, please. And here are just a sample of our Adji certified portfolio across the globe. You can see that various types of building covers multiple countries. Next, please. So, right. So IFC has been actively working on it in the emerging market, Asia, Latin America, and Africa, and we're also involved in developed countries as well. But we focus more on emerging and developing countries. And here, as I mentioned earlier, a programmatic approach is delivered. So we work with various players, governments on raising awareness, and also develop regulations and incentive. But we're also working with the private sectors, with the developers, and the banks where IFC invests, is an investment arm of the World Bank. So we also invest our equity, our loans, and all that. And I think for this audience this afternoon, we're happy to hear that, happy to share that we also work with universities on a program that we call Design for Greater Efficiencies. Next, please. Right, and this is just to give you a flavor of how the work that IFC has done in Indonesia, partnering with Jakarta and Bandung local governments, but we also work with the national governments in another city, which is Semarang. So you can see that through partnerships and through regulations, the works can be encouraging. Next, please. And I mentioned about the green building course in university. So this is globally we work, but just to give you an example, so we work in Indonesia and in Vietnam in the region. In Indonesia, since January 2019, we partnered with 5 universities, UI, ITB, Ibu Dewi's campus, and then UGM, ITS, and Undip, where we IFC developed the training model, and then we do training of trainers for the lecturers, and then the lecturers then transfer the knowledge to the students as an elective course within the Department of Architecture. And happy to say that this year we've also at another University of Tarumanegara in Jakarta, and in Vietnam, I think we've partnered with 4 universities already. Next, please. Right. So let's look into the incremental costs and benefits now. Right. So actually achieving 20% saving in energy, water, and also in materials, it only requires a few practical adjustments. I think people in the audience today are very familiar with in terms of energy efficiency, how you cut it. So this is the things that we included in the IFC's Edge software, which is the external saving devices, reflective pane, insulation of wall, high efficiency boiler for water, energy saving lighting systems, low E coated glass, and also energy efficient air conditioning. This is just to name a few. We have a full suite of more parameters in our systems. Similarly with water and materials, we also have things that people can choose as adjustments to their design. So you'll be able to see it in the IFC Edge software once you log in there. Next, please. Right. Now, talking about costs, right? It's been perceived that it's high cost to have a green building and all that, but actually IFC has done some research and it shows that actually it's much lower than market perceptions. A case in point here is with Ciputra in Indonesia, where they see less than 5% of incremental costs with a payback period of less than 2%. Similarly, in Vietnam, our partner Capital House reported that they have a 1% increase. And I should say that it's really possible to bring it lower if the concept is built, when in the design stage, so very early in the process, right? And next, please. So, and then in terms of the benefits of returns, right, there's another IFC study. It shows that across the different type of buildings, the returns are possible and it's quite high. And the payback period across the board here is less than 2 years. Of course, the incrementals ranges, depends on the type of buildings, but just want to say that it's actually something that's still, when you compare the cost and benefit, it's actually quite comparable and significant, right? Next, please. So I have a few case studies to show here, but I won't really dwell much, but just to give you a flavor that this has actually been done, this is implemented and it brings results, right? So in South Africa, one of our partners there, the investors IHS, done a study, and then actually the residents, the people who lives in the building, because of the energy efficient features in the buildings, they're able to save up to 1 month rent of their annual rent, so 1 month, equivalent of that, right? And this is significant actually for people, so they can allocate their resources for more productive resources, education for the children and others, right? Next, please. And also in Vietnam, we see that the different value is that by doing it, and also with the IFC urban branding, it actually transforms into faster sales for the developers. The Capital House here, featured here, reported that they were able to increase their sales by 3 times through the EDGE certifications for their low-income housing, which also shows you that affordable housing, social housing, low-income housing, it is also possible to make them green, having introduced the energy efficiency features in their buildings, right? Next, please. And another example from Indonesia, this is Citra Majaraya by Ciputra. So I mentioned that the incremental cost is less than 5% with 2 years payback period, and they're able to save 30% lower energy bills for the homeowners. Right, next please. So what exactly needed also, right? So there's a private sector kind of, giving some examples, demonstrations, and directions towards that. But what's also important is the government's, government's partnerships. In this case, we have, we've listed from, if you move to the next slide, please, you can see that there are a number of incentives that the green buildings, for government can offer green buildings. And we see that actually compared to regulations, so we work on green buildings regulation as well as incentive. Incentive actually takes, the uptake is more than the regulation, because enforcement, having a regulation is one thing, right? but having it enforced is another set of problems. There's so many implementations issues and challenges, but incentive, if governments can put it, and it doesn't have to be fiscal incentive, it can also be others. So it doesn't have to be fiscal or tax, but it can be bonus density, it can be expedited permitting, it can be grants, loans, it can be technical assistance like awareness raising, training, knowledge, net metering, public campaigns, and then I mentioned legislations. Next, please. So, and this is to show you that it's already been done. So it's not just, on paper, but countries from Argentina, Brazil, to Ghana, India, Indonesia, Kenya, already come up with green buildings incentives. Next. And I just want to share with you here, we've done a number of papers. So if you go to our website, then you can see it among there. One is this paper on policy pathways for emerging market. And then the next one, please, is more on finance and policy blueprint for emerging markets. Next, please. So, all right. So now I'd like to switch gear and discuss a little bit on the future of green buildings. Touches on the importance of partnerships, innovation and technology, and also a pathway to zero carbon and resilient buildings. Next, please. So on the partnerships, this is an example of Colombia where we have different parties together, and the result is amazing, right? So we have a chamber of constructions, and we also have financial institutions, the banks, insurance. We have government comes in with VAT exclusions, and when they all work together, within their instruments, then what we have is up to now is 2.4 million of space certified or registered, and we have green mortgage loans, and then we have 400 million programs by the banks, Bank of Colombia, and we've also done some trainings by IFC. So here, if we work together, then different parties will bring their own strengths, and it actually works. Next slide, please. All right. And this is zero carbon and resilient buildings from IFC. This is something that we believe is the future. And as mentioned earlier, there are different people that make it happen, and it can happen through new buildings, retrofits, clean energy needs to, bring it to the factors, and then IFC is also coming up with resilience buildings kind of index, right? Right. Next slide, please. And at IFC, for IFC, we begin with 20%, which is a standard, and then if people can make it more energy efficient, their building, then we can issue Edge Advance 40%. And if they want to go all the way, either energy saving on site or achieving 100% through renewables or topping off with carbon offset, then IFC also has already introduced what we call zero carbon buildings. Next slide, please. And then we already have an example, happy to say, from Manila. This is Artaland. So this is the first Edge zero carbon certifications. And they have won on awards that. Next slide, please. And the great news is that to make that all happen, the tools are already here. And then now IEA, I think, very happy to say that they introduce an online tools as well. So to bring into the tools that required by private sectors, by the practitioners, by the governments to make it all happen, right? So from IFC side, we have Edge, we have Building Resilience Index, we have Apex for the cities, and then we also work with finance institutions, and we have case studies available. We also work on research and on partnerships, and on the disclosures, we have the partnerships with CDP. So all of this will bring not just from the kind of supply point of view, but demand point of view, but also from the supply point of view. I think we really want to make sure that it's the market is there, the market is transformed to all these various bits and pieces. Next slide, please. On the financing, so Adji is aligned with this green finance standard. So we work very hard to make sure that it's being recognized. And next slide, please. And also, next, please. We do a lot of marketing support for Edge certifications, and then this is new things for us. We just launched last week in the Philippines the Building Index Resilience Index. If you're interested to hear, we're happy to discuss this with you further. And then I think before I finish, if you go to the next slide, I really must acknowledge the IFC's donor partners who have made all this work possible. These governments, we have UK, we have Swiss. We are, they're the reason that IFC is able to develop the software and offer it, and also the applications for free, and also the university work that we do, and also the work with the governments and financial institutions. So I stop there. Thank you very much again, Melanie, for the time.
Thank you so much, Farida. Again, a really comprehensive, but a different angle. A couple of things, well, there's many things I'd love to pick up on when we get the opportunity. But one of the points you made was about affordable housing. And, we mustn't have energy efficiency seen as being a luxury for the well-off. It's got to be something that we can make available to all. Clearly, of course, Adji is the most amazing, most fantastic public good. It's a fantastic tool for everybody to use. And so, it's just a brilliant contribution to the whole conversation. And of course, when we were able to do training in person, particularly in this region, then on our buildings policy training, IFC always came in and gave a guest presentation on that. And I really hope that in the not too distant future, we can go back to that model, as well as using these online tools. But really, of course, keen to work very closely with you on all of this. We'll pick up on some of those points in the discussion if we have a few minutes. But for the moment, we are going to hand over now to Lem, who's the head of certification and technology, picking up on some of the things that other speakers have said so far, the importance of these aspects. And also, of course, in one of the most successful green buildings markets of the region, so Singapore. So Lem, thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So good afternoon or morning again, depending on where you're listening in from. I'm Lem from the Singapore Green Building Council, and we are really advocates for green and sustainable buildings in Singapore, in the built environment. So today I will just share a bit more on Singapore, the updates from Singapore towards improving the energy efficiencies in the built environment. Okay, we're all very familiar with the Paris Agreement, so I'll just start with Singapore's commitment. In 2015, through the NDC, Singapore committed to reduce the carbon emissions by 36%, carbon emission intensity by 36%. Sorry, give me a moment. Okay, so fast forward 5 years, if you see on the left side of the screen, in early 2020, Singapore announced an enhanced 2030 NDC. So on the left side of the screen, we target to peak our emissions at 65 million tons CO2e at around 2030. So this is consistent with the previous target of 36% reduction. And moving on to 2050, we target to halve our emissions and to reach 33 million tons CO2e by 2050, with a view of achieving net zero emissions as soon as viable in the second half of the century. Okay, Subsequently, the Singapore Green Plan 2030 was announced earlier this year in 2021. The Green Plan is really a whole of government movement to advance Singapore's agenda on sustainable development. So you can see on screens are the 5 key pillars. So they are city in the nature, which looks into creating more green spaces, planting more trees, looking at the biodiversity. And second pillar will be on sustainable living, which really is about promoting a circular economy through recycling, maximizing the value of resources and reducing waste. Third pillar is on energy reset. So this is where we look to lower our carbon footprint through the use of cleaner energy, as well as increasing energy efficiency. So I'll touch a bit more on that later. The fourth pillar will be on green economy, which really is about creating jobs and business opportunity. And last but not least will be the resilient future. So we look to mitigate and adapt to climate change that has already begun. For example, coastal protection, urban heat mitigation efforts. Okay, so we'll move into energy efficiencies in the built environment under the Energy Reset pillar. So Singapore started the green journey for the built environment in 2005, starting on the left of the screen. So with the launch of the Green Mark scheme by the Building Construction Authority. So over the years, there are also 3 other editions of the Green Building Master Plan that serves to guide us towards the target of achieving 80% to green 80% of our buildings by 2030. So we have made good progress so far, having green approximately 43% of our buildings by GFA. And a lot of them are actually going beyond the basic requirements. So this signals that the industry is ready to aim for higher standards. So in view of that, in 2021, we actually launched a new version of the Singapore Green Building Master Plan. And with the new Green Building Master Plan, we strive, we strive for higher long-term ambitions for green buildings, and we want to make super low energy buildings mainstream. That means really to push for wider adoption of super low energy buildings. The journey of the 2021 Singapore Green Building Master Plan started last year, in fact, in 2020. So BCA and Singapore Green Building Council co-led and set up the Master Plan Community, which consists of more than 80 industry stakeholders from different points of the value chain, such as consultants, developers, contractors, suppliers, researchers, and others. So in setting the new master plan, it's important to better understand the barriers faced by the practitioners on the ground, as well as we want to understand from the industry what are the potential, whether we can stretch for higher targets. So the early decision was to reach out to a wider segment of stakeholders through various engagement in order to really co-create this the new vision for the new journey. So with that in mind, we successfully engaged 5,000 individuals through the process of coming out of this new master plan. So all this accumulated into the release of the public engagement report earlier this year in February 2021. And through the feedback and suggestions gathered, the committee had collectively shaped the vision, key outcomes, and initiatives that will effectively help drive the green building agenda forward. And after the initial launch, there was also continued engagement with the wider industry and public. So this is to really raise awareness and garner buy-in and support to co-deliver the key outcomes and initiatives. So you talk about the key outcomes. So which are the key outcomes that the new Green Building Master Plan aims to deliver? So there are 3 of them. First will be for 80% of our buildings GFA to be green by 2030. So actually this was from the earlier Green Building Master Plan as well. This target is not new. But in the next lap, we also want to step up the pace of greening our buildings and look to improve the quality of our building stocks. So even those that have been green before, we want to continue to push for higher sustainability standards. The second outcome is for all new developments to be super low energy from 2030 onwards. And we want to mainstream the super low energy building. So we hope that all buildings eventually will be super low energy. So by super low energy, is basically 60% more energy efficient compared to the 2005 baseline. Third outcome will be for 80% improvement in the energy efficiency by 2030 for best-in-class buildings. So this will be supported through research and innovation and deployment of these new technological solutions to the market. These are some of the proposed measures that will help us achieve the 3 key outcomes that we've seen in the previous slide. So like through regulations, raising the minimum energy efficient requirements. So these are the mandatory standards. Then Green Mark 2021, which is a voluntary scheme. So we want also to raise the sustainability standards through that. So green gov.sg is a public sector taking the lead initiative where all the government sectors commit to mainstream super low energy buildings. Data, also data transparency, collecting data on building performance and also publishing them. This is to share to the built environment that how can we achieve higher energy efficiency because your neighbors are already achieving it. Then lastly, there will also be support measures to encourage adoption through fundings and financing scheme, for example. Okay, so BCA will also be reviewing the Green Mark scheme to raise the standards accordingly. So since 2005, Green Mark has hello, yeah. Okay, so sorry. So BCA has raised the minimum energy efficiency requirements for new buildings and existing buildings that will undergo major retrofits to be 50% and 40% more energy efficient compared to 2005 level, respectively. So the current standards, if you see on the left side of the chart, will be 30% and 25%. So that will be raised to 50 and 40%. So BCA will also be reviewing the Green Mark scheme to raise the standards. And since 2005, Green Mark has been a key lever and performance benchmark for various green policies. And the new Green Mark 2021 is currently in the piloting stage. So you can visit the website for more information. Okay, the second key outcome, we want to have 80% of the new development with super low energy from 2030 onwards, and to mainstream the super low energy building. So I think quite similar to what Farida mentioned earlier on the economics of green building that she presented. In order to support the business case of super low energy building, BCA performed the life cycle cost analysis of a super low energy building project. And the findings are, you can see from the chart here. So super low energy building, we have also the Green Mark Platinum building, Gold Plus building, and Gold. Understandably, each of the projects will have a certain green premium. But what the finding shows is that Green Mark buildings reap a net positive savings over their life cycle. So they are looking beyond simple payback as well. There's the energy savings actually outweighs the upfront costs. So I think this appeals to the business owners, because they really want to see that there will be a net present value. They can get back more through the savings compared to the green premium they pay upfront. So currently there has been encouraging progress on green buildings striving to go super low energy. So when we started in 2018, when we started the super low energy scheme in 2018, there were only 14 projects. And then now the number has grown to 43 projects awarded super low energy building certification, with 20 more that's working towards the certification. And to further create a demand for super low energy building, the government will also take the lead to give a stronger push through the greengov.sg scheme. Okay, this is the third outcome, which is to strive for 80% improvement in energy efficiency by 2030 for best-in-class buildings. This will be through the support of research and innovation and deployment of those new technologies to the market. So on that, there is a Green Building Innovation Cluster, or GBIC, program that supports the research and development, as well as to help researchers, innovators demonstrate green building solutions through prototyping. So we want to strengthen the research and innovation partnership and collaborations to develop more energy efficient and cost-effective technologies that can help to support the push for more super low energy buildings. Yeah, so in summary, these are the three key outcomes that Singapore is targeting to help us achieve to green more buildings by 2030. So it's 80 in 2030 targets. So okay, that's my last slide. So thank you.
always impressed with the progress that Singapore has made on these issues, and the kind of leadership that's shown for the region and globally as well. So hugely important examples and experience. I particularly liked your point about data sharing as well. I think that's something that we don't perhaps talk enough about. And if all of the separate groups that we need to bring together to different types of stakeholders to have this nose to tail energy efficiency process in buildings, if we're going to have to make it work through design, through to construction, and through to resilience, that sharing of data is hugely important part of that process. We've heard really interesting things today that will certainly strengthen the roadmap already that we're working on, as well as, of course, contribute potentially new examples to the training. So thank you everybody for that. We have a few moments for some questions. And I would like to kick off, I think, by going back to this point about making energy efficient, comfortable accommodation available to low-income groups. And maybe we could just go round the panelists one by one briefly, and just very brief responses, please, to see what you think working together, the private sector and the public sector can do to make this make this more available. So I'm going to start with Andrea, if I may, from the Philippines. How do we make this work for low-income households?
For low-income, Melanie, are you talking about residential projects or?
Yes, housing? I am in particular. Yeah, so residential projects. I mean, we saw an example where there was huge competition for highly rated residential sort of apartments, but that was for wealthy people primarily. You know, how do we make this accessible for low income as well?
Okay, I think it would be most beneficial for the vertical, condominium type of housing. One of the problems actually that the Philippines is facing is a housing backlog, because majority of our people under the poverty line are living as living in informal settlements, and the one that is in charge of actually building the housing typology here in the Philippines. So we have a national housing agency, and there have been, compared to the awareness and appreciation of green buildings, let's say in 2013 to now in 2021, there has been an increase, and the capability of the professionals, the built environment professionals, has increased. And I think it is, in my opinion, this will be my opinion, is that there needs to be a conversation between the private sector or private professionals like us, architects and engineers, who are advocating for energy efficiency, and the government agencies that are actually building this settlement type of housing, so that there will be an appreciation of why we need this energy efficient measures. There's no easy answer yet, I think, with regards to that, but I think a discussion and appreciation between, because there is no mandated law or standard yet that all government housing must have a degree of energy efficiency at the moment. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So Retno, you work on a hugely thorough analytical basis, providing evidence for why certain things should happen. How can we answer that question that Andrea raises? How can we show governments who are trying to build accommodation for people as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible, how can we use your evidence, the type of evidence you gain, to persuade them that it must be, it can and must be done in a sustainable way, rather than just thinking, got to build something, got to build it quickly, and locking in poor performance. How can we use your sort of evidence to make that happen?
Yeah, I think related to the green building council, I do not know exactly that there is a green building guidance, and also guidance for how to develop facility for the housing area, but it's released from the Ministry of we call it as a public works. Yeah, but in Jakarta there is also a group that discuss about the how to implement, not really the building code, but they have like a association or frequently meeting and discuss how to achieve the energy efficiency, for example, a monitoring part or equipment part, and also if there is a provider for the electric appliance that is already efficient, and then they share the information together between them. In my experience, it's a long time ago in the group of hotels in Bandung and also office building in Jakarta. We have a group between MA manager, mechanical and engineering manager, and then and also the group for the GM. Both of this group discuss about energy efficiency, and then they release like a flyer every month, and we put benchmarking between the how efficient the building that they have here. But it only works 3 years. After I leave this program, I think they can running by themselves because of our program is already finished. And after that, they stop the activity. Yeah, it's not, there is no benchmark between the building. Yeah, if we can keep this activity, I think like a green building guidance can also introduce through this group. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, because of I saw in the internet and we can download it, but if we can not campaign about this book, nobody use this book, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So Farida, does the IFC preference loans to low-income residential projects at all? Is there a mechanism for making sure that they're green?
Yeah. Because of but not all in area, because of we talking about there is a regulation under the governor or under the city, and then the city have to check on monitor or inspection for the building whether this is already efficient or not, because of if not efficient, and then will give impact to the consumer, because the consumer have to pay more about this. Yeah.
Thank you.
There is punishment, because of the punishment, the building cannot operate.
Okay, so it doesn't have a license to operate.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's a useful tool. Farida?
Yes, thanks, Melanie. So I think from the IFC slide, we have a few examples or cases, right? Affordable housing and green buildings. One is to work directly with the developers, where IFC issue, IFC buy bonds that they issue or financing mechanisms, right? So that the developer can build green, and then they can sell it directly to the market. The other things that we've done is also working with banks, financial institutions. So IFC provide financing to the banks, the issue a bond, IFC buy it, right? And then the banks then channel it through their credit system mechanism, loan system, mortgage, to the people. So that's the second way. And then the other things is we're exploring in Indonesia right now is to work with the government. They have huge backlogs on housing. So they have housing programs, and then they give incentive to the developers through expedited permittings, for example, and things like that. And from IFC, we want to make sure that they build green, energy efficient homes, and greens also includes water and materials, right? So that's where we come in. We provide advice on how to make it, even though it's low-income housing, social housing, there is still ways to make it, better, make it more, as well as more livable for the people. And the other things that I would like to mention is in the Philippines, recently we launched into a collaborations with NHMFC, the National Home Mortgage Finance Corporations. I believe it's a state-owned entity, right? Whereby they then provide discounted rates for developers and also homeowners, but provided that the homes itself, which is affordable houses, has to be built green. So there's a few models that we do. And also I'd like to share that even directly with the developers, IFC also already certified green. In Indonesia, we have Rusunami, which is the rented social housing. We have 7 towers just outside of Jakarta that is already as certified. So it is actually possible. And we've done some calculation on what is the incremental cost, what is the payback period. So it just needs more, I think, education for the developers, financing the banks people, as well as the homeowners.
Can I
Thank
ask
you.
you, Ibu, because of when the implementation of the building code or green label, and then increase the cost, and then the consumer will pay more for about this because of the concept is green, and then the cost for the price of the housing is or complex area is increasing. And is it possible that the finance can reduce for the spend for applying for the certification or applying for the equipment, and then can reduce the cost itself, because of the concept will increase also the price of the house.
Right. So I guess how do we offset the increased cost, right? So I think there are 3 ways, or maybe more ways, but three that I can think of right now. One is actually the government can help absorb it, like in the case that I mentioned. So they provide assistance in terms of expedited permitting. As you know, that building houses in some countries, it's the land acquisitions is a big headaches and building permits and all that. So that also helps the developers to to kind of set off the cost. So they have to kind of add elements of green building, which is not much, like $200, even around that for one social housing unit. But they can actually recoup that through other costs that otherwise they have to pay. Or another way is the government can also working with companies through the CSR so that they offer subsidized houses. This is also being done, but in a not as grand scale as we wanted. The second way is through the financial institutions, and how it works is because of the less risk involved by the bank, because it's high energy efficient, so that the utility bills will come down. There will be more income for the families. There is ability to kind of pay the mortgage on a timely manner. So there's less associated risk with the mortgage. So the bank can actually set it off and then give a kind of a more attractive rates to the developers. And this is something that we've seen in Colombia, and it the result is amazing there. As I mentioned, 2.4 million of square meters for affordable houses, built under that kind of scheme. And so I mentioned governments, I mentioned bank institutions, and I mentioned the governments, right? And I think also the developers, even though it's they had to put in incremental cost, but in the case of Vietnam, the capital house, because they're able to sell it much faster, so they can, they're willing to absorb it and set it off, but provided that of course, the incremental cost cannot be, significant or too big. And that's why I mentioned that it's very important to build the design early, so that, it's much easier and much more practical, much more economical to make it, green if it's embedded in the, in the early design stages, rather than when you already have it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. So in the case of Singapore, we've seen really, really impressive, action there. You talk about more than 40% of buildings being built green. How do you make sure that low-income households have affordable housing that's sustainable as well? How do you link that in Singapore?
Yeah, so in Singapore's case, I think you may be aware that the government actually takes the lead in a lot of these things. And then in Singapore, we have the public housing system, public housing scheme that houses 80% of our population. So that is really where the most of the lower income families will go as well. So in the presentation earlier, government takes the lead scheme. So this is one of them. All the public housing under the HDB that the government builds will also meet the legislated requirements and also going beyond that. So a lot of them are public housing projects are going for the highest green mark rating possible. So what I wanted to add is also that when we talk about green, a lot of times we think that there's an upfront cost and all that. But I think the message here is building green doesn't mean it's going to cost more now. We have a lot of business case to support that. And also building green may not mean it will take a longer time. It's really choosing the right materials and all that. So it may not mean it will take a longer time. So it's just a choice. And also for public housing, for housings, right? When you build, then a lot of times after the homeowners move in, they are the one who decides on the energy efficiency. So on top of building green, I think it's also important to educate these people, because they are the one who decides what fridge they want to buy, what lighting they want to use, what washing machine they bring in. So parallel to that, we also have a scheme educating the public on the importance of the energy efficiency, and we have the TIC rating system, which are the more energy efficient fridges, refrigerators, which are the more energy efficient washing machines, and which one saves more water, for example. So I think that's also very important.
Yeah, good point. Everybody, all of these constituencies have an important role to play. Ian, as we kind of wind towards the end of this, I wonder what you think we can, I think we've heard so many interesting things that can enrich the roadmap process, but would you just kind of maybe do a brief summary of the things that you think we can draw from this conversation into the roadmaps themselves?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mel. And it's to say thank you to all of you who of the panel to contribute in this way. And I think that what we can do with the roadmaps themselves is draw in what you've been describing around the implementation of how you achieve the outcomes that we've described. I think where we look at financing and the way in which, Farida, that you've described the different mechanisms by which financing can be implemented and accessed. And as you say, kind of the practical, put a plan in place, make sure we know who it is that is going to be responsible for those things. And then, of course, the wider implications of that, ensuring that there are processes for developers to engage or land use planners to engage. I think when we look at, being able to make use of building codes, Andrea, as you mentioned, just being able to draw in, the practical process of ensuring that there is compliance, but in a way that is constructive. And yes, you have to have the law, the regulation for it, but being able to work with officials to be able to implement that. And of course, gain trust within the industry that this is happening. I think also kind of the technological advances that are being described, Len, by yourself, in terms of where buildings are going next, say, and how they can be more integrated with the system that they're in, particularly, say, the electricity system and smart grids and the like. And I think that's going to yield a lot. And if we can build examples around how that's being worked in the region within the roadmaps, I think that would be extremely important. And of course, Retno, what you described as well in terms of being able to say, if we take a comprehensive overview and if we look at different ways in which, building technology is going to be adopted across different archetypes of buildings, I think that could be really, really exciting. So I guess what I'd be hopeful for is that with the roadmaps, we'll be able to draw in not only from a policy perspective what is existing in the region, but then also to ensure that the strategies that are being developed, and of course with your own contributions to that, that they're practical, that they're implementable, because we see, as Mel described at the beginning, that the very initial stage of implementation is going to be in the context of a recovery, of an economic recovery. We need to ensure that that is a way of building for our future at the same time. So I can see that that's how these various strands are going to feed into the roadmap in that way. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Ian. I also think, having listened to all these conversations, go back to this concept that it's a package of measures that are needed, but the package should be integrated, and the separate measures shouldn't necessarily be separate. So I think it was Farida who talked quite a bit about what positive incentives were out there compared with mandating things. But I think I would argue, and I think it's coming through for me in this conversation, that we can use them together so that we only make the incentives available to those who actually comply with the mandated requirements. And we can actually make the mandated requirements perhaps more stringent because the incentives are available. So we have a very concrete link between those things, so that we don't, in a way, we don't give too much away, and we really do use incentives to drive this better performance that we all know is available. And there's, as Lem said, there's a lot of evidence out there to suggest that it doesn't have to cost more, but there is a perception that it costs more. And so perceptions rule in a way. We have to find ways around them, even if we don't necessarily believe in them in ourselves. So I think for me, it's the integration of all of these opportunities, but being very transparent about the connections between regulation, the information that Lem talked about, the incentives, and making sure that that's a very coherent, stepwise approach that we can take based on evidence that people here are clearly showing, and also, as Lem said, based on data and generating data that is available to all, so that we can continually build as we go forward. So loads of interesting comments, lots for us to build on. Partnerships I hope that we can continue to develop over the coming months and years, albeit in this virtual mode, but also hopefully one day working together face to face and in country again. So thanks everybody for your contributions. I hope that people listening are motivated to take the course. Please do, and please tell your networks about the course. We'd like feedback on it. So if there are things that you think can be improved, if you think there are linkages, for example, we can make more concretely with programs like Edge, tell us what you think. We want to adapt and build on this over the coming months and years. And with that, we'll close. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions, and thanks to the team at the IEA for putting this together.